Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Sectumsempra by Severitus 812, JessalynMichele, Book 2 of Harry Potter and 7 Years of Chaos. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags, and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Summary: Harry Potter enters his second year at Hogwarts surrounded by power, allies, enemies, secrets that whisper to him from the castle walls, and a past that won't give him any peace. Severus Snape prepares himself for another year of keeping the most chaotic student he has ever had the misfortune of meeting alive. Welcome to Year 2. Chapter 1, Villa Zabini. Welcome to the Villa Zabini, Blaise said proudly, spreading his arms wide. He laughed at Harry's gaping mouth until Harry scowled at him. This is where you live? He asked incredulously. Sometimes, Blaise conceded. We also have homes in France, England, the States, and I believe one in Taiwan. What the fuck? Harry said quietly. Blaise laughed. His mother was going to love him. Come on, come inside and meet the Contessa. Blaise pulled Harry through the yard and up to the villa entrance. Harry spun around slowly, staring open-mouthed at the ocean the villa overlooked. Wow, he whispered. That's nothing, Blaise said, waving off his oar with a wink. Wait until you see the pool. You have a bloody swim-in pool, Harry hissed as they stepped inside the parlor. My language please, there are ladies present. Blaise beamed as his mother descended the stairs towards them. She had clearly prepared herself for their guest. Her royal jewels were affixed to her dark hair and around her slender neck. Blaise, my dearest Amati, welcome home. She embraced him warmly, kissing both of his cheeks. I trust that your year was well. Yes, mother, Hogwarts was as wonderful as you told me it would be. Thanks to Harry, he thought. Blaise was sure it would have been dreadfully dull if they had not been classmates. Excellent, she patted his cheek fondly before turning to Harry. And this must be the Harry Potter that I have heard so much about. She leant towards him, very slowly and obviously showing her intention, and to Blaise's surprise, Harry allowed her to kiss both of his cheeks lightly. Blaise had never seen Potter allow anyone to touch him, aside from Susan Bones, and even she couldn't do it without a flinch or glare from the younger boy. Thanks for inviting me, Harry said softly. Of course, dear, you are an ally of the Zabinis, are you not? She smiled gently at Harry and patted his cheek. You are always a welcome guest for as long as we are tied together, Harry Potter. Casa mia y grave casa tua, my home is your home. Blaise nearly laughed aloud at the look of awe that Harry wore. He knew his mother would love him. *pov swap*. Juliana Zabini was not a woman easily impressed. She had 7 deceased husbands that could attest to the fact. But Harry Potter was a marvel. He carried himself with the wariness of a battle-hardened soldier, with the gratuitous facial scars to solidify the image. Contrary to his physique, he was soft-spoken, and seemed to do most of his communication through his enchanting emerald eyes. Juliana could sense the power rolling off the delicate boy, power which he manipulated and used easily, it seemed. Her Blaise had written many letters to her highlighting Harry Potter's many qualities and his lessons on respecting power that he taught other students. The child was quick-witted, cunning, clever, and after having many discussions with him, seemed to be entirely grey-oriented. Maraviglia. She went out to the backyard a couple of days after the boys' arrival, to find them both laying on the chaise lounges and laughing. Good afternoon, gentlemen, she called to them, sitting gracefully next to her son. Evening, mother, Blaise responded dutifully. Hello, ma'am, Harry said softly. Juliana did not allow herself to grimace at the child's speech. She had too much grace for such an act, but it did remind her of her hope for the next 12 days. Harry, darling, I wonder if I could convince you to take a class with me during your stay here. Harry, the clever child that he was, gave her a shrewd look. What kind of class, Countess? She gave a small laugh. The child's consistent politeness was an enormous part of his charm, even if he clearly misunderstood her title of royalty. Contessa Harry, she corrected gently. Although I have told you, please call me Juliana. Harry blushed and gave her a small nod. and as I believe that you will grow to be incredibly important to the Wixen world, I wondered if you would see the benefit of elocution lessons. Harry glanced quickly at Blaise, an obvious look of confusion on his delicate fey-like face. Electrocution lessons, he asked with his nose scrunched up. Sorry, I don't get it. Blaise laughed at Harry's confused face. Elocution, he pronounced slowly. It's a fancy word for speech lessons. Harry, bless his heart, turned a truly remarkable shade of red. No thanks, fine, he mumbled sullenly. Juliana moved to Harry's chair and slowly sat down beside him. Harry, my Meraviglia, do you believe that I would insult you in such a way? Harry ducked his head but shook it slowly. No, ma'am. And you are correct, I would not. You understand that we are allies, yes. Harry glanced up at her, his large green eyes wide. Yes, ma'am. She slowly placed her hand on his cheek. As your ally, I only wish for the best for you, yes. I wish for you to succeed because as you rise, we rise together. Now I find your accent to be part of your fascino rustico, your charm, but there will be those who will not, who will sneer down their long noses at my Tesoro Harry for his pronunciation, and I will not have it, not if I can prevent it. Will you appease a lady by consenting to spend one singular hour in the afternoons learning to speak with pride? Harry studied her carefully. She believed the child must be rather adept at reading facial tells, before nodding. I can do that. Fantastico, she said brightly. We shall begin after our evening meal, yes, yes. Blaise smirked at Harry's politely befuddled expression. Yes, Harry Potter was a true marvel. *pov swap**. Harry couldn't believe how bloody posh Blaise's home was. He could have spent all 2 weeks just exploring the house, and still not seen everything, and Blaise hadn't been exaggerating on his library. It was brilliant, just rows and rows of books with the most interesting titles. Wixen Culture, The Forgotten Ways, Defensive Magic, A Complete Guide, Spells to Stop the Heart, and 3 bookcases dedicated solely to dark and grey classified spells. Which, as Blaise told him, Hogwarts absolutely did not have. Harry spent his mornings in the library, reading as many books as he could, and taking careful notes on the spells he is itching to try. After breakfast, when Blaise finally woke up, the two of them usually went down to the ocean-front beach, which Harry loved, or they swam in the pool, which Harry enjoyed much more after Blaise taught him how to swim. One particularly brilliant evening, they went down to the closest Wixen village and practiced team, dueling with some of the village boys. Apparently Italy didn't have the same views on underaged magic that Britain had. Brill. After they ate dinner, Harry sat in the study with the Contessa and worked on proper pronunciation. Which was bloody ridiculous. But Harry couldn't deny that he looked forward to their lessons. Even though she spent a lot of time correcting his speech, the Contessa was brilliant and happy to discuss and debate all different topics with Harry. He thought it was nice that they had most of the same views. Calling it dark magic is just a way to make it sound dirty, she had said, although there were a couple topics they disagreed on. Creatures are simply not as intelligent as we Wixen are, the Contessa said. With the exception of the Fae, who hold a seat on the Italian Council, they should not require representation to muddy the waters of our governing bodies. What about werewolves 30 days of the month, Harry had countered with, or goblins who we trust with our gold? How many of your house elves know your family's secrets? How can you trust them to keep your secrets but not to have an opinion on their lives? Think about it. On the morning of his birthday, he woke up to an entire flock of owls perched on the generous windowsill outside his guest room. Merlin, he breathed, opening the windowpane to let them in. He laughed as the 6 owls seemed to compete to be the first one he approached. Calm down, wills ya? He carefully undid the packages and scrolls attached to each owl, stroking their feathers and pointing out the owlery window to them. Go there, okay, you can fly right in and there's all sorts of good food in there for you, he said softly. 5 of the owls immediately took off as soon as they were relieved of their parcels. Only one owl, a tiny little black fuzzy feathered thing with big yellow-green eyes, jumped around on the dresser hooting happily. Aren't you hungry? Harry crooned. No, okay, you can stay for a while. He stroked the excited little owl's feathers softly and moved the packages to his bed. Are these all for me? He whispered in awe. He was glad that Blaise was still asleep, because he had a hard time swallowing back the hot tears that tried escaping. You will not cry over this, he told himself sternly. It was just that. He'd never had a birthday present before, had he? Harry slowly opened the first box, scanning the letter to see it was from Ron. Happy birthday, mate. Sounds like you're having fun in Italy. Maybe next summer you can come stay here for a few days. It's no villa, but I've got a lot of brothers we can play Quidditch with. Mum made this special for you. I told her it's your favorite. Can't wait to see you on the train. Harry grinned at Ron's short and to the point letter. He pulled a metal tin out of the box and was happy to see that it was his favorite treacle tart. It was even still warm and smelt as if it had just came out of the oven. He picked out a small piece and nibbled on it while he opened the next parcel, a thick and heavy envelope from Neville. He pulled the parchment out of the envelope and saw a little silver figurine fall out with it. He laughed when he saw it was a perfect model of a devil's snare, except with a stamped insignia of a knight's helmet surrounded by floral engravements, right on the front of it. Hey Harry. Happy birthday, I miss you all and can't wait for school to start back up. Although it's been an oddly good summer with Gran. She seemed really pleased that we were friends, and even more pleased when I said we entered an alliance. She didn't seem to understand gangs much, course I'm not sure that I do either. She told me that sometimes allies give out tokens to each other, something that has a meaning for us both. So here's a little devil's snare for you, with the Longbottom family crest on it. I'll see you on September 1st. Your friend, Neville. Harry was happy that he had remembered Neville's birthday was the day before his, and had sent him a book on magical plants. He probably hadn't gotten it before he wrote the letter. Smiling much easier than he usually did, Harry eagerly opened the next package, which wound up being a banned book on blood magic from Theo, and a short note reminding him to disguise the cover lest you get caught with it, and we both end up as potion ingredients. Harry smirked and immediately put his hand on the cover, make it look innocent and legal. He laughed when he saw the book now read Magnus Bane's Trip to Mexico, a graphic novel. Theo was going to die when he saw the book now. Harry peeked inside just to make sure it didn't change the content and sighed in relief when the index still highlighted the sections for different types of blood magic. The next package he opened also happened to be a book, alongside a 6-page letter from Hermione. Who writes that much? He shook his head. He skimmed over most of the letter, vowing to read it more thoroughly later, and laughed outright when Hermione wrote that she bought him a book on healing spells because who knows what nonsense you'll get into this year. Hermione could be funny when she wanted. He could see how she went to witty Ravenclaw. Harry pulled the box clearly marked, from Susan Bones aka your best friend, towards him, and smiled at the obscene amount of stickers the witch had decorated it with. Harry, I'm not going to write because I'll see you in 2 weeks. But you have to use your present to take 1,000,000 photos, oops, that's a hint, isn't it? Of Italy and Draco's home. I can't wait to see them and you. Happy birthday. Love, Susan. Harry thought Susan's letter sounded just like she did, bubbly, enthusiastic, and outgoing. Basically the opposite of Harry himself. He immediately used her gift, a green magical camera, to go to his window and snap a few photos of the view. He'd have to ask her how to develop the film when he saw her in a couple weeks. The little black owl that was flitting around his room hooted until Harry took a photo of it too. You're needy, aren't you? He laughed. Harry, happy birthday. Blaise burst in his room, clearly hopping to catch him by surprise. He pouted. How are you always awake before me? Harry slept a lot better now that he's gotten the hang of clearing his mind every night, but he still slept a lot less than his dorm mates. Probably because you're lazy, he joked. Lazy and proud of it, Blaise declared, flopping on Harry's bed. What you get? Here, Harry shoved the pile of opened gifts towards Blaise. You can look while I open Draco. He went to open the thin, square parcel, and saw that it wasn't from Draco, but was from Professor Snape. Potter, I hope that you are managing to stay out of trouble, although I find the mere idea laughable. Ensure that you are studying hard, keeping up with your summer assignments, and practicing occlumency as often as you can. I believe you will understand the significance of the included package. Harry pulled the gift out of the wrapping and beamed when he saw what it was. What is it? Blaise asked curiously. It's a CD, Harry said happily. Led Zeppelin, my mum's favorite. It's a muggle thing, Blaise asked. S'pose so, Harry shrugged. But muggle items don't work in areas with high amounts of magic. How will you use it? Fuck, I dunno. Harry turned back to Snape's letter to finish reading it, hopping for instructions on how to get a disc player to work at Hogwarts. I believe you will understand the significance of the included package. I am sure you are cunning enough to find a way to utilize it this year, despite the belief it is meant to be impossible. As Snape. Harry laughed. Snape was such a bastard. He said he's sure I can find a way to do the impossible. Blaise rolled his eyes and peered inside the empty envelope. You're his bloody favorite. Hey, wait, there's another scrap of paper in here. He pulled out a small note and read it out loud. Potter, this owl is an unruly nightmare who has given me constant headaches. I believe you two will be a perfect match. He does not have a name, but he looks remarkably like a demon to me. Write to me, brat. Blaise looked at Harry, who was staring open-mouthed at the flittering owl. You're mine, Harry asked quietly. The owl hooted and nipped at his ear. You know, I bet Snape likes you more than he does Draco, and Draco is his godson, Blaise laughed. Harry stroked his new owl and shrugged at Blaise with a tiny smirk. I guess Snape just got good taste. I almost wish Ron was here, Blaise sighed. He'd take me up on the bet if Draco curses or cries when he hears me tell him that Snape prefers you. Blaise jumped off Harry's bed and opened the door. Come on now, Mother wants to spoil you with a ridiculous breakfast, spread and gifts, before Draco shows up to whisk you away to his manor. Harry put the tiny black owl on his shoulder and followed Blaise down to the dining room and stared in open-mouthed shock at the room. You did this for me? Harry asked Blaise. The room was decorated in green and silver balloons and streamers, with a large banner across one wall that read, Buon Complino Harry. Of course, Harry dear, the Contessa said, gliding over where he was and kissing both his cheeks. You only have a birthday once a year, yes? Harry didn't want to tell her, but this is really the first birthday he's ever officially had. And who is this beautiful creature? She crooned, slowly petting the owl's head. Thank you, Contessa. He smiled at her shyly and ducked his head. He was a gift from Professor Snape. No need to thank me, my Meraviglia. We are like family now. Come sit, bring your darling companion. Trilly will bring us food while you open your gifts, yes. Harry allowed himself to be led to the table, where the Contessa seated him at the head. Here, Blaise said, shoving a box towards Harry. Open mine first. Harry carefully unwrapped the package and gasped softly when he saw what was inside. These are brill, he sighed. Do not shorten your words, Harry dearest. Brilliant, the Contessa corrected him. Harry grimaced. She was always after him for how he talked, and apologized while Blaise laughed at him. They're dragonhide, and they're charmed to grow as you do for up to 3 sizes, Blaise explained eagerly. They're the most fashionable and practical boots for wizards. Thank you, Harry said, stroking the obsidian-scaled boots. They're brilliant. Much better, my dearest, the Contessa praised him. And this is from me. She levitated a small box to Harry, who accepted it with a small blush. You guys didn't have to do all this, he protested feebly. The Contessa moved over by Harry and put her small hands on his cheeks. We did because you are familiar, and we spoil our familiar when we can. Harry didn't know a lot of the words that the Contessa used, but he could recognize familiar, and he had to will himself, for the second time that day, not to cry. Thank you, he whispered in more of a choked voice than he wanted to have. The Contessa kissed his forehead, and Harry kept himself very still while she did it. She wasn't scary or threatening, it was almost like having a mum might be, he thought. Will you open the gift now, my Harry, so that my Blaise has a chance to be jealous? She asked with a soft laugh. Harry grinned at her, saw her wink at Blaise, and happily opened the gift. He pulled out what looked like more dragonhide. It matched his boots anyway, but he had no idea what it was. Thank you. The Contessa and Blaise both laughed, although she quickly corrected his speech again. Apparently, is a proper noise a young man of his standing should make. Harry would have rolled his eyes, except he was worried she would scold him for that as well. It is a holster for your wand, she told him. Allow me to help you attach it to your forearm. Harry tentatively held out his right arm, watching her warily as she took the holster and attached it. You slide your wand in here, yes. The material itself is charmed to be impenetrable. Only you will be able to summon your wand from it, which you can do with a small flick of your wrist, she explained. Harry doesn't use a wand, Mother, Blaise scoffed. I don't think he used it once, besides in McGonagall's class since he got it, have you? Harry thought he used it a couple other times but couldn't remember. I used it last summer, he eventually said. See, Blaise laughed. He just terrorizes everyone with his hands. Blaise wiggled his fingers like a spider, as if to prove his point. The Contessa gave Blaise a fond smile, which is all the more reason that he should carry his wand, yes. Why? Blaise asked, his dark brows furrowed. Doesn't he look more powerful without it? He does not need to look powerful, she corrected Blaise. His allies know he is powerful, yes. It is about his enemies underestimating him. Imagine their expression of shock when our Harry is disarmed and still attacks with no wand. Harry could picture it perfectly and gave the Contessa a sharp smile. That's genius, he told her. It is strategy, she said simply. You will learn, my Harry, I will teach you. Harry smiled all through the rest of breakfast, which Draco interrupted, showing up 4 hours earlier than they had planned. Excuse me, he said, blushing faintly. I suppose the time difference threw me off. Blaise and Harry shared a skeptical look before both bursting out in laughter. I told you he'd be early, Blaise said. Bet you got up before the sun, didn't you? Of course not, Draco denied haughtily. Harry smirked at him. He didn't like to bet like the other Slytherin boys did, but he'd almost be willing to bet that Draco was lying. Sewerah, Blaise drawled. Well, you might as well sit down and eat. Mother won't let Harry leave until he's overly stuffed. Harry scowled at Blaise, even as the Contessa easily agreed. Our Harry is much too thin, she said airily. He needs to be reminded to eat more. Harry mentally groaned at the gleam in Draco's eyes. Like he said, he didn't like to bet, but if he did, he'd put 10 galleons on Draco, pestering him to eat more during the next 2 weeks. After breakfast, Harry reluctantly packed his birthday presents in his trunk, situated his new owl on his shoulder, and gave one last mournful glance out his window. Write to me, won't you, my Meraviglia? Put your charming new owl to good use, yes. Harry nodded shyly. Yes, Contessa, thank you for inviting me. She gave him a warm smile, making her brown eyes sparkle. Of course, my darling, you are always welcome. Casa mia e grave casa tua, Harry Potter. And Harry, who had never had a real home, felt his throat swell with tears as he flew away with Draco. Don't cry over things you can't have, he reminded himself harshly. Weaknesses get you killed. He couldn't forget one of the earliest lessons he had learned in his life. Chapter 2, Malfoy Manor. Father, we're here, Draco yelled as soon as Harry came through the flue. Well, as soon as Harry fell through the flue anyway. Draco, do stop screeching in the house like a banshee. Draco flushed slightly as his father entered the sitting room. Sorry. His father just waved a hand and smirked at him. No worries, I believe there are probably a few people in the town who did not hear you. He turned his steely silver-eyed gaze on to Harry. Now, introduce me to your friend Draco. Draco straightened up as he was taught to do and gestured to Harry. Father, this is Harry Potter. Harry, this is my father, Lucius Malfoy. His father strode forward and offered his hand to Harry. Pleasure, Mr. Potter, I've heard much about you. Thank you, sir, and thank you for having me, Harry said softly, eyeing his father's bejeweled cane closely before shaking his father's hand. Of course, Severus says you are a model Slytherin. Harry tilted his head as he glanced at his father and smirked just a little. He didn't say I was well behaved though, did he? His father laughed, something that Draco rarely heard, and gave Harry a considering look. No, he did not say that. Harry grinned at him even as his eyes flicked quickly around the room. Come on, Harry, I can give you the tour. Oh no, wait, first I have to give you your birthday present. Or actually, are you hungry? Draco knew he was rambling, but this was the first time one of his actual friends had come to stay, and he was excited. Gregory and Vincent did not count as friends, especially since they were all in nappies last time they stayed. Draco, why don't you show Harry to his room, and then you can give him his gift, and you boys can explore the manor if you still feel up to it, Father suggested. Good idea, come on, Harry. Harry followed behind Draco, turning his head side to take in the manor as they walked. This is a nice place, he offered. Draco puffed his chest out proudly. It's been in our family for generations. My great-great-grandfather, or great-great-great maybe, had it built. Draco didn't think Harry was all that impressed with his family history, because he just said, cool. It was cool. Draco led Harry to the 3rd floor and waved him inside the guest rooms. These are your rooms, he told him. A bedroom, bathroom, and an attached sitting room. You and Blaise are so bloody posh, Harry laughed, setting his owl on the perch by the window before flopping on his bed. "Come on, where's all the servants?" he joked. Draco rolled his eyes, long used to Harry's disdain for the finer things in life. "We do not have servants, we have house elves and they are perfectly happy here," he sniffed. "But if you think having nice things is ridiculous, then I suppose you don't want your birthday presents." Harry rolled over on his side and gave Draco an easy grin. "You didn't have to get me anything. It really was nice of you to invite me to stay." Draco grinned at him. "Shut up, you'll love it. Stay here." He ran quickly to his room, down the hall from Harry's, and grabbed his gift. "Here, open it." Draco thrust the package at Harry and bounced on his feet until Harry opened it. "What the fuck?" Harry whispered. He looked up from the brand new Nimbus 2001 and stared at Draco. "You got me a broom." Draco beamed and nodded. "I got one too, and now we can try out for the house team together." Harry stared at him for a few more seconds before abruptly laughing. "You're mad. This is way nicer than the one I nicked from school. Can we go fly?" "Yes," Draco cheered. "They're the top of the line. I'll grab mine and we can go out back." Harry jumped up with an eager look on his face. "Come on then." Draco was about to go get his broom when he hesitated. He did have one more gift for Harry, but Harry looked so excited right now. Happy in a way Draco rarely sees from him. Surely it can wait. "Race you," Draco called, pushing out thoughts of his other gift out of his mind. The boys spent an enjoyable couple of hours on the pitch, chasing after the snitch and practicing some of the moves Draco had seen professional players use in matches. He begrudgingly admitted that Harry would be an excellent seeker and made him help him practice for a chaser's position. "There's no way they won't choose us for the team," Draco said happily as they put their brooms away. "We'll be unstoppable." Harry smiled brightly, his cheeks flushed from the wind and his eyes alive. "Do you really think I'm good enough to make the team?" Draco caught himself right before clapping Harry on the shoulder. He almost forgot Harry's vicious aversion to being touched. "Of course," he said easily. "You're just as good as I am at seeking, and I'm amazing." Harry raised his brows at Draco and gave him an amused smile. "Then how come I caught the snitch every time if I'm just as good as you are?" Draco crossed his arms and gave his friend a small glare. "Beginner's luck," he muttered petulantly. Harry just laughed at his pout and offered to race him back to the manor. *POV swap*. Harry Potter was an interesting person. Lucius had tried to subtly dig into the child's past during their frequent conversations. How did the boy who lived come to require housing during his holidays? The child was as evasive as they come. "Which matters more, my past or my future?" he'd asked, his eyes sparkling with amusement. "Would you like to tell me about your past?" he added in an innocent tone of voice that Lucius easily saw through. It seemed the child knew of Lucius' affiliations, and yet still consented to be a guest in his home. Either he was incredibly foolish, which Lucius did not sense from him, or he knew he had nothing to fear. Did he believe Lucius would not hold a grudge on behalf of his fallen master, or was he arrogantly confident that he would be able to protect himself if it came down to it? "Do you know how to duel?" he asked the boy during breakfast one morning, halfway through his stay. Potter and Draco shared amused looks, a look that made Lucius believe Draco has kept Potter's secrets close to his chest. "I do," the boy said, an amused grin on his face. "Learned from the best, supposedly." Draco let out a sharp laugh that he hastily covered at Narcissa's scolding look. "Sorry, excuse me," he said quietly, his grey eyes still shining with mirth. Lucius ignored him and focused on Potter. "What would you say to an exhibition after breakfast? Underage magic is not traceable in our home, due to myself, Narcissa, and the elves' levels of magic." "Darling, is that really necessary?" Narcissa hummed. "I thought I would take the boys shopping for proper wardrobes today." Narcissa had been eyeing Potter's casual wardrobe with increasing scorn. She fretted for him at night that the poor boy needs a woman's touch. Lucius held the very private belief that if it were up to her, Narcissa would adopt every orphan child she encountered, magical or not. He never understood how she developed such an empathetic heart, considering the family she was raised in. Potter, who seemed to equally adore and fear his wife, hastily answered Lucius' request. "Of course, we can duel. I'd love to see what you can teach me," he added in a shy voice. Lucius may have been flattered by the child's remark, if it were not for Draco's quick look of fear that told him perhaps Potter was attempting to play him for a fool. "Don't hurt him, okay?" he heard Draco hiss to Potter as the three of them entered the dueling chamber. "No promises," Potter winked. Lucius would have scoffed at the child's arrogance except the boy held the same casual stance that Voldemort did before he was a Dark Lord and instead simply ruled over Slytherin. His eyes were sharp, focused on Lucius. He twirled his wand carelessly between his fingers, and he had a small smile on his face, one that was equal parts curious and bloodthirsty. "We bow," Lucius said. Potter jerked his head in a semblance of a bow, never taking his eyes off Lucius, but clearly refusing to subjugate himself for sport either. "We begin," Potter said softly, a mocking lilt to his voice and to his smile. It did not matter what Lucius threw in Potter's direction. The boy sidestepped, dispelled, and blocked every curse, jinx, and hex aimed for him. He pondered if James Potter had any magical creature ancestry. Potter certainly duelled with the grace of Avila and the quickness of the Fae. At one point Lucius saw an opening. It seemed as if Potter was distracted by creating a complex shield, and disarmed him. He was momentarily both elated to finally end the duel, and disappointed that Potter had let him disarm him so suddenly, after only 5 minutes of the child defending himself. "Should I begin?" Potter laughed, unconcerned with his wandless state, before a flurry of multicolored lights came flying at Lucius. He barely threw his shield up in time to avoid them, and gaped at the boy. Lucius had worried that Draco's tales of his allies' power had been exaggerated, as his son is prone to do on occasion, but he was intrigued to see that if anything, his son understated it. The publicly beloved Harry Potter seemed to use his magic as naturally as one would use their limbs. It was as fluid as it was fierce. He had to immediately go on the defensive, losing his ability to strike back at Potter as the boy easily threw continuous curses his way. "I told Draco I wouldn't hurt you. Do you want to surrender?" Potter jeered. "Malfoy, do not surrender," he said stiffly, both insulted and exasperated. He was losing a duel to a 12-year-old child. It was mortifying. "Sorry, Draco," Potter called over his shoulder to his son, who Lucius is sure he heard groan. Before Lucius could blink more than twice, his glimmering shield suddenly froze to a corporeal block of ice, melted to the floor, and he was stunned in place. "The Contessa is a genius," Potter breathed, apropos of nothing, before dancing up to him, graceful and deadly, and easily pulling both wands from his hands. "You got off lucky," he said softly, with a hard glint in his eyes. "Usually I don't consider a duel over until someone bleeds." Lucius was momentarily relieved to be stunned, as neither boy could witness his shiver of unease at Potter's words. The tone of voice, coupled with the grisly facial scaring, all coming from an undersized child, made for an impressive display. "How on earth did you accomplish such ease in commanding your magic?" Lucius asked him once Potter released him and retuned his wand. The boy gave him a small grin and a modest shrug. "I always knew I was special. I just didn't know it was magic I could do, did I?" Lucius doubted whether there had even been a wizard alive who mastered silent and wandless magic at such an age. Special indeed. Potter also seemed heavily interested in politics. They spent a few memorable evenings in Lucius' office discussing the best way to build political alliances. "It's about who you can reasonably assist in the future when they call on you for a favor," Lucius instructed him. "If you ally yourself solely with light or dark-oriented families, then you will find yourself involved in dark or light activities." "What about neutral families?" Potter asked. "There are very few officially declared neutral families. A true party of neutrality remains outside of all dark and light conflicts." Potter hummed for a moment, considering, as he paced in front of the wall of weaponry that Lucius decorated his office with. What about a grey party? Wouldn't that make a third side in any conflicts? Then you could fight for your beliefs, but you wouldn't have to stick to a specific angle. Lucius inclined his head at Potter's train of thought. It would be possible to have a grey alliance if there were enough interested candidates. As of now, the Wixen world is strictly divided by light and dark. "What if I want to build allies but I don't want to owe any favors?" Potter mused, changing the subject now that he was apparently pleased with Lucius' response. "How do I do that?" "You cannot be an ally of equality if you expect them to assist you without you assisting them," he told him. "Then, hypothetically of course, how did Voldemort and Dumbledore do it?" the child asked, carefully stroking Lucius' goblin-wrought sword on the wall. "I doubt they ran around doing favors for the people who fought for their side in the war." "They did not have allies," he stressed. "They had followers." His intrigue in Potter became tenfold at the sharp smile the boy sent him. "Followers, got it. *pov swap*. Severus was not altogether surprised to be called over for a drink by Lucius during Potter's stay at the manor. The child had wrote a few letters to him describing his stay with the Zabinis and his current placement at Malfoy Manor. Apparently Lucius, confident man that he is, had challenged Potter to a duel, and Potter employed a brilliant new tactic Blaise's mum taught him and disarmed him. Severus hoped Potter would share the memory with him at some point. "Severus, please have a seat," Lucius greeted him upon his arrival. "Lucius," he nodded to him, "I trust your summer is going well." Lucius gave a short chuckle, aloof and cordial. "It is certainly interesting," he allowed. Severus imagined that having Potter as a houseguest would be a rather interesting experience. "The boys are behaving themselves?" he asked, accepting the offered glass of whiskey. "They are. I believe they are currently practicing for Quidditch tryouts now." Severus should have known that if James Potter's love of the sport had not been passed on to Potter, that Draco would convince him regardless. "Wonderful," he said dryly. "I'm sure that Draco and Potter will certainly be favorable additions to our team." Lucius gave him an amused look and hummed non-committally. The two men sat in a comfortable silence, sipping their drinks, Severus patiently waiting for Lucius to bring up the true reason he invited him over so abruptly. While it wasn't unusual for Severus to flew over and share dinner and drinks with the Malfoys, it was different to be firecalled and invited on the same evening. "Severus, I wonder who your true alliance is with?" Lucius eventually asked, after refilling their glasses. Severus stared into his whiskey, swirling it around his glass. "I wonder why you would ask me that," he said evenly. And if I told you that I may have a few items that link me to the old days that I may now wish to be rid of, what would you suggest?" Trying to have a subtle conversation with a politician, such as Lucius, was as convoluted as attempting to combine multiple potions for a singular outcome. One wrong step and you may find yourself fatally injured. "I would suggest, if you wish to find solace with a new ally, that you rid yourself of ties to the past," Severus said slowly, measuring his response. "I would further suggest that if I was incorrect in my assumptions of your intentions, that you do not speak of this." "And if you are not incorrect in your assumptions," Lucius asked with a single blonde brow raised, "if you were correct that I may wish to sever ties to the past, would you tell me where your loyalty lies?" Severus stared at Lucius, his brother in all but blood, and hoped that a future on the same side was possible once again. "My loyalty lies solely with the foolish child currently zooming around your pitch," he said carefully, not explicitly identifying Potter in case this conversation is later viewed by another. "He seems to be intent upon creating his own side, though if this answer displeases you, or anyone you choose to report it to, I invite you to either duel me or accept and obliviate now." Lucius smirked at his friend. "No need for dramatics, my friend," he said before raising his glass. "I propose we toast to the soon-to-be-formed Grey Alliance." As Severus tilted his glass towards Lucius with a smirk of his own, Lucius considered a small black diary that he needed to find a new home for. *POV swap*. "Boys, meet us at Flourish and Blots in 2 hours, all right?" Narcissa asked them. "Yes, mother," Draco responded obediently. "Come on, Harry, let's get our supplies quick so we can see if we can find Weasley and Granger." Harry grinned at Draco's enthusiasm. Ron had written and said his family, plus Hermione, would be visiting Diagon Alley today as well, and suggested they met up. First, though, Harry had something to knock off his to-do list. "I need to go to Gringotts," he whispered after making sure the other shoppers were out of earshot. "I've got something to put in my account, don't I?" Draco furrowed his brows, deep in thought, before suddenly perking up. "You have it with you," he hissed. "Merlin, Harry, you're mad." Harry gave him a crooked grin, and briefly held up the stone he had retrieved from his warded trunk that morning. "Safest place in the world is Gringotts, right? Much better than Hogwarts anyway," he laughed. Draco glanced around, probably worried about eavesdroppers, before groaning. "Well, come on then, let's go deposit it before something horrible happens." Harry smirked at Draco's theatrics and fell in step beside him easily. "What kind of horrible thing do you think I could make happen?" he asked him curiously. Draco just glared at him. "Knowing you, probably a tornado full of inferi or a hailstorm the size of quaffles." Harry thought it over. A tornado full of inferi would be rather handy though, wouldn't it? But where would I keep it when I didn't need it? Draco just groaned and refused to discuss the possibilities with him. Apparently, he didn't need help for any of his mad ideas. Rude. They entered Gringotts and Harry gave a sharp smile to the goblin at the counter. "Grefuk," he said, nodding his head respectfully. "I need to visit my vault." Harry heard Draco's gasp of surprise when Griffook bowed his head back in a show of respect. Maybe if other Wixen treated goblins like people, and not servants, they'd see more displays like this, Harry thought irritably to himself. One step in changing the world at a time, though. Is your charmed coin purse not to Herr Potter's liking? Griffook asked curiously. Harry shook his head quickly, thankful for the easy-to-use bag the goblin gave him last summer. No, it's brilliant, thank you again. I just need to make a deposit. Apologies, Herr Potter. I simply need to see your proof of identity, and then you can make your deposit. Harry raised his right hand and focused his magic on it, removed the cloak. Draco, bloody drama queen he is, gasped again as his air ring shimmered into sight. How did you get that? He asked. Father says I can't get mine until I'm of age. My parents are dead, aren't they? Harry said casually, ignoring the sharp stab of grief he had at the words. You can claim your heirship if you're of age and your lord is still alive, or you can get it early if you're the only heir in line for the lordship once you take a blood test. Herr Potter is correct, Griffook said, inspecting the magical ring on Harry's right hand. An heir ring will not accept a wearer if they are not yet of age unless they are the sole heir left in the line. He gave a curt nod at Harry's hand. That is in order, Herr Potter. Would you like to visit the vault or allow me to make the deposit for you? Oh, would you? Harry asked, recloaking the ring. That would be brill, Griffook's, thank you. He pulled the stone out of his pocket and wrapped it in Griffook's hand. I don't think I need to tell you that I'd rather nobody know I have ever been in possession of it, he whispered. Griffook glanced at his hand, then gave Harry a sharp and mean smile. Herr Potter is very clever and sneaky, he said softly in his gravely voice. This will be in the Potter vault, and if anyone learns of its presence, I will present myself to you to be drawn and quartered. That's not necessary, Harry said hastily. Just put it in my vault, please, no need for any quartering. Griffook had proved last summer that he was a good vault manager. Harry would hate to replace him. As you wish, Griffook bowed his head again. Is there anything else I can help you with? Nope, Harry said pleasantly. Just that one little thing. May your gold multiply, Griffook. And may your enemies cower at your feet, Herr Potter, Griffook responded cordially. They will, Harry winked at him. As the boys left the bank, Draco gave Harry an incredulous look. How on earth did you get the goblin to respect you? Harry rolled his eyes at Draco and crossed his arms in irritation. Well, it's not hard, is it? I just respected them first, he sneered. You know, easy things like calling them by their proper names instead of goblin. Griffook is just as magical as we are. Draco seemed to not have a response to that aside from staring at Harry in shock. Come on, Harry said, dropping the subject. We better get started if you want time to find Ron and Hermione. The boys ran around the alley, gathering their supplies and trying to dodge the Harry Potter fanatics they encountered. Draco laughed himself to tears as Harry bald-faced told a man that he was not Harry Potter, but was instead Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. You don't look much like a Malfoy, the man said, eyeing Harry closely. How dare you? Harry stuck his nose up in the air. I will be telling my father about this. You're such a prat, Draco laughed. Harry grinned, and from then on they made a game of Harry stealing the identities of their classmates every time he was accosted. What's going on there? Draco asked, pointing to the crowded bookstore. Dunno, Harry answered, but I think I see Ron's family in there. He pointed to a group of redheads and Draco grimaced. Let's go then, we have to get those ridiculous Lockhart books anyway. Weasley, Granger, Draco called, waving at their friends. What in Merlin's name is going on in there? Hermione squealed in excitement and pointed at a sign that said, GILDRYLOCKHART. We'll be signing copies of his autobiography. Magical ME. Today 12:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Wonderful, Draco groaned. Ron introduced them to the rest of his family, at least the ones Harry hadn't met before. This is my dad, Arthur, and my mum, Molly, and my sister, Ginny. She's starting school with us this year. Hello, Harry said to them. Thank you for the fudge, Mrs. Weasley. Ron's mum, a plump witch with wild curly red hair, stepped towards him with her arms outstretched as if to grab him and squeeze. Oh, Harry dear, she sighed, not remarking on his quick dance out of her reach. It was no worry. I was so happy to do something nice for Ron's friend. She beamed at Harry and he gave her a nervous smile back, though he was saved from replying when Ron's sister, Ginny, squealed at him and turned bright red. What the fuck? Ron laughed and told Harry and Draco quietly, Ginny, obsessed with you, talks about you all the time. Draco sniggered while Harry grimaced at Ron. The last thing he needed was more insane people staring at his forehead. Hope she's not in Slytherin, Harry muttered darkly. Ron chuckled and led the other three inside, pushing and shoving his way past the crowd. A long line wound right to the back of the shop, where Gilderoy Lockhart was signing his books. They each grabbed a copy of the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2, and sneaked up the line to wait their turn to grab the Lockhart books and pay. Gilderoy Lockhart came slowly into view, seated at a table surrounded by large pictures of his own face, all winking and flashing dazzlingly white teeth at the crowd. The real Lockhart was wearing robes of forget-me-not blue that exactly matched his eyes. His pointed wizard's hat was set at a jaunty angle on his wavy hair. A short, irritable-looking man was dancing around taking photographs with a large black camera that emitted puffs of purple smoke with every blinding flash. Out of the way there, he snarled at Harry, moving back to get a better shot. This is for the Daily Prophet. Fuck off, Harry said, glaring at the photographer fiercely. Gilderoy Lockhart heard him. He looked up, he stared, then he leapt to his feet and positively shouted, "It can't be Harry Potter." "It's not, it's Neville Longbottom," Harry tried protesting, although nobody besides Draco seemed to hear him. The crowd parted, whispering excitedly. Lockhart dived forward, seized Harry's arm and pulled him to the front. "Get your hands off me," Harry sneered, sending a spark of blistering magic to Lockhart's arm. Lockhart let go quickly, hissing between his straight white teeth, before shaking his hand out and putting his arm behind Harry, without actually touching him again. "Nice big smile, Harry," said Lockhart, through his own gleaming teeth as the photographer clicked away. "Together, you and I are worth the front page." Harry tried to slip back to Ron, Draco, and Hermione, but Lockhart pulled him back to his side by his shirt collar. "You've got half a second to let go before I put you in the hospital," Harry hissed. Lockhart gave him a bewildered look but quickly let go of his shirt. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly, waving for quiet. "What an extraordinary moment this is. The perfect moment for me to make a little announcement I've been sitting on for some time. When young Harry here stepped into Flourish and Blots today, he only wanted to buy my autobiography, which I shall be happy to present him now, free of charge." The crowd applauded again. "He had no idea that he would shortly be getting much more than my book, Magical Me. He and his schoolmates will, in fact, be getting the real Magical Me. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I have great pleasure and pride in announcing that this September, I will be taking up the post of defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." The crowd cheered and clapped, and Harry found himself being presented with the entire works of Gilderoy Lockhart. Staggering slightly under their weight, he managed to make his way out of the limelight to the edge of the room where he saw his friends waiting. "Bet you loved that, Neville," Draco laughed. "You all right there, Harry?" Ron asked. "What you do to Lockhart to get him to let go of you, huh? Cut him." Harry shook his head, blistered. "He's a prat." Hermione glared at him, unimpressed by his assessment. "I think he's wonderful," she said. "Then you can have these useless fucking books," Harry said, offering his stack of books. "Oh," Hermione blushed a little. "I already bought mine, thanked you though." "Well, here then, Ginny, you can have them." Harry tipped his stack of books into the young girl's cauldron. "Th, thank you," Ginny stammered, staring at Harry with a star-filled look. "Don't mention it," Harry murmured, uncomfortable with her gaze. "Children, there you are," Ron's dad called, walking up to their group. "Do you all have your books? Excellent, let's..." Ron's dad's suggestion was cut off by the arrival of Draco's father. Well, Arthur Weasley." "Lucius," said Mr. Weasley, nodding coldly. "Busy time at the ministry, I hear," said Mr. Malfoy. "All those raids, I hope they're paying you overtime." He reached into Ginny's cauldron and extracted, from amid the glossy Lockhart books, a very old, very battered copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. "Obviously not," Mr. Malfoy said. "Dear me, what's the use of being a disgrace to the name of wizard if they don't even pay you well for it?" "Merlin," Draco sighed softly, "this won't be good." Harry looked at Ron and saw his ears were a bright shade of red, clearly an impending sign of an argument. "Mr. Malfoy," Harry interrupted, "Draco and I finished our shopping." Malfoy seemed momentarily startled to see Harry and Draco standing there beside Ron. "Here, girl, since it's the best your father can afford for you." Mr. Malfoy dropped Ginny's book back into her cauldron. Boys, come along, I believe Narcissa is waiting for us to join her for lunch. Harry and Draco wished a hasty farewell to Ron and Hermione before following Draco's father out of the store. Thanks, Harry, Draco murmured. No problem, Harry assured him. On his last night at Malfoy Manor, Draco decided that they were going to have a real-life sleepover, which apparently meant that they needed to drag Harry's bedclothes into Draco's room and create a pallet on the floor to sleep on. Harry, who had slept on many floors before in his life, wasn't sure how it was meant to be fun, although he could admit that Draco's plushly carpeted floor was just as comfortable as most beds were. Draco also had Dobby bring up more snacks and treats than the two of them could ever eat. Harry laughed as the odd little elf did his usual dance in front of him, muttering about Harry's supposed greatness. The elf was weird as hell, but Harry liked how much it always wanted to help him. I had another birthday present for you, Draco said quietly as they were sharing a bowl of chocolate digestives. Harry was about to protest when Draco cut him off. I found out why Voldemort went after your family. Harry sat up and stared hard at Draco. Seriously, Brill, how'd you find out? No, wait, what'd you find out? Draco shifted around and gave Harry a guilty look. I asked my father. He was part of Voldemort's inner circle at the time. Harry just nodded impatiently. He already knew Malfoy had been on Voldemort's side. He said there was a prophecy, Draco continued hesitantly. All they knew it said was, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. Supposedly there was more, but the spy didn't get to hear it. Some seer told it to Dumbledore though, so he knows the rest. Harry rolled over to his back and stared up at Draco's ceiling, thinking it over. Voldemort and Dumbledore must be fucking idiots. Harry, Draco called quietly, are you okay? I'm fine, he said shortly, just thinking. I'm sorry, Draco said. I didn't mean to ruin our sleepover. You didn't, Harry quickly assured him. I'm glad you told me. It's just, how often do prophecies come true? Did I already fulfill it that night my parents died? Am I really the only kid born at the end of July to parents who defied him at least 3 times? Why did Voldemort take it so seriously? Draco grimaced, scrunching his nose up in thought. I don't know much about divination. Uncle Save says it's a crock subject, but my mother's family, the Blacks, took it very seriously. I suppose Voldemort did as well. Harry hummed, still considering. I need to hear the whole thing, he decided. Dumbledore won't tell me, I'm sure of it. I wonder if your dad knows who the spy was. They would probably know who the seer was, right? Then I could get it from them. Or, Draco drawled, dragging out the word, you could go to the Hall of Prophecies in the Ministry and simply request the recording of it. Harry stared at him until his bewildered stare became a smile. You're a genius, he breathed. I can just walk in and ask for it. Draco blushed faintly at Harry's praise and nodded. That's what my father said. You just need an escort to get in the Ministry, then you go down to the Hall of Prophecies, and you give a drop of blood, and they'll let you take any prophecy linked to your magic. Draco, Harry said, thinking quickly, is the DMLE in the Ministry? Draco said it was, and Harry rolled back onto his back. Brill. The rest of their night was spent playing 5-card draw poker, a muggle game Harry was teaching Draco. When Draco finally passed out in exhaustion, much later than they usually fell asleep, Harry laid awake and made plans. Draco seemed dejected the next morning as Harry gathered his belongings, which, thanks to Narcissa's obsession with shopping, seemed to have multiplied many times over in the last fortnight. You could just stay here until term starts, Draco offered for about the 10th time that morning. I told Susan I'd go to her house and quit pestering me, Harry snapped, annoyed by the pouting. Fine, Draco grumbled, but you should come back next summer. Harry evaded giving him a straight answer, not wanting to dedicate himself to set plans. I would be more than happy to continue our debates over Owl Post, Mr. Malfoy offered along with his hand as Harry and Draco entered the parlour. Harry shook his hand and agreed to carry on a correspondence during the school year. Draco's dad knew quite a bit about politics, and Harry was hopeful that maybe he could continue using logic to chip away at his pureblood bullshit ideals. We will miss you terribly, darling, Narcissa said, hugging Harry tightly, something he had forced himself to endure from the woman the last couple weeks. Please write and let us know if there is anything we can do for you, or simply just write and tell me about your courses and your classmates. Harry shrugged and danced around an answer. He liked Narcissa quite a bit. She was warm and friendly and kind, but he hated writing letters. Letters discussing politics and the rights of all Wixen. That was a logical reason to write letters. Telling Draco's mum how his day was, not so much. "I'll see you on the train, right? We can sit together again," Draco wheedled. "Yes, Draco, I will see you on the train," Harry laughed with a roll of his eyes. "Good luck, Harry Potter," Mr. Malfoy said as Harry prepared to grab the portkey. "Do your best to irritate Severus as often as possible." Harry laughed and flashed the three Malfoys an amused smile as he spun away from their parlour. Chapter 3, Bones Cottage. Susan, POV. Harry, Susan squealed as soon as her best friend appeared in her front yard holding a portkey, his trunk, and the cutest little owl she's ever seen. "Ooh, she's so cute," she cried, reaching out to pet the tiny little black owl hopping around Harry's shoulder. "Where'd you get her?" Harry pushed his crooked glasses back up his nose and grinned at her. He was a gift from Professor Snape. "I told you Severus was a softie," Aunt Amelia called, leaning in the front doorway. "Hello, Harry, I'm Susan's aunt, Amelia Bones." Susan saw Harry stiffened, just a bit, and remembered that she didn't think he had much of a good experience with family. "Hello, ma'am," Harry said politely. "Thanked you for having me." Please call me Amelia, not ma'am," Auntie said with a laugh. "I get enough of that at work." Harry gave her a shy smile as he looked up at her. "You work at the DMLE, right?" Susan said. "It's amazing." Susan was about to interrupt. "I thought you hated," but Harry turned and gave her a look, so she shut up. But Harry hated law enforcement. He said so himself, loads of times. "Are you interested in a career with us?" Aunt Amelia asked him. "I dunno, but I'd love to hear more about it," Harry said softly. "Come inside, we'll put away your trunk, and I can answer any questions you have over lunch," Auntie said excitedly, waving Harry and Susan into their cottage. Susan almost rolled her eyes at her aunt's enthusiasm. Harry was such a Slytherin. Sometimes she compared him to the other kids she's friendly with, Justin Finch-Fletchley and Hannah Abbott and Daphne Greengrass and all the kids Harry hung out with. But Harry was different than everyone else. He was something more. She knew that the day she met him. He'd just been a little tiny thing playing with magic in a library, but when he talked it was mean and rude, and he looked like he was going to run away from Susan at any moment. She saw the scars on his face and wondered how a kid would get scars like that. Then she saw how Harry was scared to be touched and hated not being in control, and he never ever wanted to owe anyone favors. She's overheard a lot of cases her auntie presided over when she would draw and read in her office. If she was quiet, people mostly didn't notice she was there. She heard the Auras and Wisengamot members talk quietly about kids whose families hurt them. They called it abuse, and Susan always wondered what kind of family could hurt a child. Then she met Harry Potter, and she was sure that his kind of family would hurt a child. And even though it made her sad when she thought about it, it also made her really, really angry. She decided that Harry would never be hurt again, not as long as she was around. But sometimes that meant making sure Harry didn't hurt himself, because he was a little mad sometimes and made plans, and didn't seem to care that he could die following those plans. "What are you doing?" she hissed at him as they trailed inside. Harry gave her an innocent look, blinking owlishly before smirking. "Tell you later," he said quietly. "You are going to tell me every ridiculous thing you've done the last month, and every insane scheme you have coming up," she told him seriously. Harry stuck his tongue out at her but also grinned. "Yes, ma'am." She grinned back and linked their arms together, purposefully not drawing attention to Harry's tiny flinch. Harry Pov *. Harry was happy in Italy, and he had fun with Draco at his house, but being with Susan was brilliant. Her aunt's cottage was smaller than Draco's manor, which was tiny compared to Blaise's villa, but it felt more like what he imagined a real home would. Susan had a very yellow room, and told him that she painted it yellow before she was even sorted into Hufflepuff. Her aunt let Harry use their guest room, which was a very dark shade of blue. Susan said next summer she'd make sure it was green, which, even if she was joking, was still a pretty nice offer. Susan's aunt was really chatty like Susan, but she also had eyes like Professor Snape. He felt like she was watching him closely and he didn't know why, but he didn't like it. Susan had stayed up late with him in the guest room on his first night there. He filled her in on his summer so far. He told her about the beaches and the team duels in Italy, and flying with Draco, and he eventually told her about the prophecy. There was nobody he trusted more than Susan. She'd been his friend even when he was wearing trash clothes, and she'd been a good friend all year. She even forgave him for putting her to sleep before he went to find Quirrell, which Harry thought was awfully kind of her. He wouldn't forgive someone who knocked him out and left him in a corridor. Of course, nobody has ever accused him of being kind. That's horrible, she said, covering her mouth with her hands after he was done filling her in. Do you think that's why Dumbledore hid you from everyone when your parents died? That was the other thing he liked about Susan. She was smart. Hermione and Theodore were smart in classes about books and stuff, but Susan was smart about people. Yep, he told her, and it's why he's always watching me too. But we need to hear the rest, Susan said with her brows scrunched down. Harry grinned at her, happy he already thought that through with a little help from Draco. Here's my plan. She listened intently as he outlined the plan to her, and at the end she didn't scold him or try and talk him out of it. She didn't act like he was too young to worry about it. She just gave him a knowing look and nodded. Let's do it. Susan was a brilliant friend. The very next morning at breakfast, Harry carefully peppered Susan's aunt questions about her job. Susan said that the DMLE has its own flaw, he said, trying to sound breathless and excited like Susan herself sometimes did. We do, Miss Bones, call me Amelia, said. It's a very big department and there are a lot of different parts to it. Harry listened intently as she talked about auras and hit wizards and the Wisengamot. He memorized which departments were in charge of which part of the law. Apparently auras were very important, and elite witches and wizards who tracked down dark wizards. Harry very carefully did not roll his eyes at that. Hit wizards were some sort of backup for auras, and stepped in to help on big busts. And they had regular law enforcement wizards, who were like Muggle policemen, and did patrols around magical villages. Harry thought they all sounded horrible, and imagined that magical law enforcement was probably much worse than Muggles. Muggle cops could beat you up and arrest you and attack you for no reason, but they didn't have magic. Magical cops had endless ways they could make you suffer if they didn't like you. And cops had never liked Harry. I wish I could meet an aura, he sighed, perhaps a bit dramatically. I bet they have loads of interesting stories about bad guys they stopped. Oh, Auntie, I know, can we go to your office with you tomorrow? Susan asked just as they practiced. Please, oh please. Harry could see the ministry and then we would go to the library until you get off work. She gave her aunt those big puppy eyes that Harry never could resist. Pleasey. Apparently, her aunt couldn't resist the eyes either, because she laughed and agreed that they could tag along with her in the morning. You have to promise to stay out of trouble, though, she said. We will, they chimed together, sharing a secret grin when Amelia wasn't looking. This, Amelia said, sweeping her arms out wide, is the Ministry of Magic. Wow, Harry breathed, perhaps laying it on a bit thick. Amazing. They were standing at one end of a very long and splendid hall, with a highly polished, dark wood floor. The peacock blue ceiling was inlaid with gleaming golden symbols that were continually moving and changing like some enormous heavenly notice board. The walls on each side were panelled in shiny dark wood and had many gilded fireplaces set into them. Every few seconds a witch or wizard would emerge from one of the left-hand fireplaces with a soft whoosh. On the right-hand side, short queues of wizards were forming before each fireplace, waiting to depart. Halfway down the hall was a fountain. A group of golden statues, larger than life-size, stood in the middle of a circular pool. Tallest of them all was a noble-looking wizard with his wand pointing straight up in the air. Grouped around him were a beautiful witch, a centaur, a goblin, and a house elf. The last three were all looking adoringly up at the witch and wizard. Glittering jets of water were flying from the ends of the two wands, the point of the centaur's arrow, the tip of the goblin's hat, and each of the house elf's ears, so that the tinkling hiss of falling water was added to the noise of the hundreds of witches and wizards in the hall. Harry thought that it must have been a complete idiot that made that statue. He'd never seen a goblin look at a wizard like that, and even though Dobby had sort of stared at Harry all bright-eyed, he didn't really think other elves liked Wixen all that much either. Come on, Amelia said, pulling his attention from the fountain. I'll show you my office, Harry. Harry and Susan followed closely behind her aunt, and Harry ducked his head low to keep from being stared at. They walked quickly to a set of golden lifts. Amelia Bones must know every witch and wizard in the place, because she greeted them all by name. Morning, Melinda, she said pleasantly to a younger witch who was waiting for the lift beside them. How are you today? Busy, the witch muttered, scribbling furiously on a parchment. The minister has a meeting with the heads tomorrow and... She trailed off as she glanced up and locked eyes on Harry. And that's Harry Potter, she gasped. Her eyes flew back to Amelia before quickly flicking to Harry again. Why do you have Harry Potter? Amelia gave her a bland smile and a half-hearted shrug. Harry is friends with my niece, Susan, and he wanted to come see what we do in the DMLE. The witch was still staring wide-eyed at Harry, He flexed his fingers and briefly considered asking his magic to blister or shock her. Only the reminder that Susan's aunt was kind of like a cop stopped him. "Come along, Harry, Susan," Amelia said as the lift arrived, ignoring the witch who was still in place, just gaping after them. Amelia pressed the button for level 2 and explained who the witch was as they went deeper down into the ministry. Melinda is the assistant for the Minister of Magic. She does things he can't be bothered with, like scheduling meetings and sending owls and fetching lunch. She's also a terrible gossip. She winked at Susan, who giggled. Harry was relieved he hadn't jinxed her, since apparently she was close to the minister. Level 4, Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, the cool lift voice said before the doors opened. A tall man with dark skin, a shiny bald head, and a single gold hoop in his ear stepped smartly on the lift. "Madame Bones, Susan," he greeted them in a calm and deep voice. "How are you?" Harry, who was in the corner of the lift behind the man, was relieved not to be seen. "We're well, Kingsley, how are you?" Amelia said warmly. "Just fine, thank you. I had a spot of business to take care of about that spat between the goblins and centaurs," he told her. "Ah yes, well, neither of them like to share much, do they?" Amelia chuckled. "Just so," Kingsley nodded his head before turning to Susan. "Are you on your summer holiday then?" Susan nodded. "Yes, sir. We're showing my friend the ministry today." Kingsley glanced around the lift, searching for Susan's friend, before spotting Harry. "Hello, young man," Kingsley Shacklebolt. He offered a large hand for him to shake. "How are you?" Harry ignored the offered hand, hopping to instead settle for a nod of acknowledgement. "Harry, and good, thank you." Shacklebolt seemed like a decent bloke. He took a few small steps away from Harry, which he was grateful for, and either didn't recognize him or didn't make a big deal of it if he did. "Harry Aura Shacklebolt is one of the top auras in the country," said Amelia. "He could answer any questions you have about the job." So maybe Shacklebolt wasn't a decent bloke after all. Harry tried to shuffle subtly further from the man, but found he had literally gotten himself into the corner. "Oh, do you like your job?" he stammered. Harry, who was looking down at his hands, missed Kingsley's raised brow at Amelia, who shook her head minutely. "Not now," she mouthed. I trained with your father, you know." Harry looked up sharply at him. Shacklebolt looked older than his dad did in the photos Harry had of him, and it gave him an uncomfortable feeling to realize that Shacklebolt was 10 years older than his dad ever got to be. It also made him feel a little hysterical to realize that his dad was training to be a part of the DMLE before he'd been murdered. Was he any good? Shacklebolt gave a deep chuckle and shook his head, his earring glinting as he did. He would have been better if he didn't spend all his time trying to prank the other trainees. Harry tried to give him a smile at that, but it just made him think of all the ways Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas spent pranking him. "Oh," he said lamely. Level 2, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Harry was relieved to get out of the lift. His hands had started to shake lightly at being trapped in the small space with both Amelia and Shacklebolt. He gazed around the large open area and almost darted back into the lift as the room went silent, and it seemed like 30 sets of eyes stared back at him. Susan," he whispered, reaching blindly for her. "I'm here," she whispered back, grasping his hand tightly and helping him feel more centered. "Is that Harry Potter?" a wizard gasped, jumping to his feet and approaching them quickly. "Mr. Potter, it's such an honor." Harry looked at him and tried to channel Professor Snape's most scornful look. "Thanks," he said simply, ignoring his hand reaching out for him. The first wizard seemed to break the hold on the other employees, because they all seemed to crowd around him. "Thank you for what you did, child," one woman sniffled while reaching out for him. "You're a hero," someone else said, also reaching out as if to touch him. Harry felt his heart racing and his hands starting to sweat and shake. Thanks," he said, desperately trying to not have a panic attack in a room full of magical police. Susan gave her aunt a pleading look, jerking her head towards Harry. "Back to work," Amelia ordered sharply, sending a steely gaze to the closest witches and wizards. Harry thought Amelia must be a strict boss, because immediately people started backing away from them, still sending Harry insufferable smiles and worshipful gazes. "Come on, kids, I'll show you my office," she said. Harry followed closely behind her, breathing deeply and glaring darkly at the people they passed who stared at his forehead. "They can't even see that stupid little scar," he thought irritably. "They're going to sound like real prats when they tell their friends, 'Oh yeah, I saw Harry Potter's bangs today." Susan kept a hold of his hand, and then promptly released it as soon as Amelia's office door closed behind them. He gave her a grateful look. He didn't know how she could tell when he was ready for space, but it was nice to be understood by someone. "Those people are morons," Amelia grumbled under her breath. "I ought to bring Alastair back for a day to scare them back into using their damn brains." Susan giggled and gave Harry a soft look. "You okay?" she whispered. "Fine," he whispered back. And despite the confining feeling of Amelia's office, it was loads better than being crowded by all those people, and he could feel his pulse slowing down to a normal rhythm. "Well, Harry, what do you think?" Amelia waggled her brows up and down, taking a seat behind her desk. "Is this everything you ever imagined?" That got a small grin out of Harry, even if it was forced. "It's definitely just as big as Susan said it was, and you're in charge of all those people out there." Amelia scowled but nodded. "Sometimes I think I'm in charge, and sometimes I think I'm babysitting." Harry stepped over to her bookcase, examining the books on it while keeping Amelia and the door both in his line of sight. "It must be a lot of W." Harry was cut off by a short and curt knock before the office door was unceremoniously thrown open. A man entered. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet and looked around Amelia's office expectantly. He was a short and portly man, and had on a pinstriped cloak and matching bowler hat. "Madame Bones," he said excitedly, making eye contact with Harry. "You didn't tell me you'd have a visitor today." Harry glanced over at Amelia and saw she huffed out a little annoyed breath. "Harry, this is the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. Minister Fudge, this is my niece Susan's friend Harry Potter." The minister was surveying Harry with a look that was both pleasure and trepidation. Harry decided he liked the man. Anyone who seemed to both like him and was a little nervous to be around him had to have good instincts. "Hello, Minister Fudge," he said with a nod. "I've heard a lot about you." Fudge gave a weak chuckle. "All good things, I hope." They weren't, but Harry wasn't an idiot. "Of course, sir. Lucius Malfoy says how you're the greatest minister we've ever had." Lucius Malfoy had confided a few things about the minister to Harry during their talks, but that had never been one of them. He did say that the minister thrived off of praise, which seemed to be spot on. Minister Fudge drew himself up proudly and gave Harry an approving look. "So you know Lucius, do you? Excellent." He looked around Amelia's office slowly before refocusing on Harry. "And what brings you here today, Harry?" Harry gave him a bashful smile and squeezed Susan's hand sharply to convey a quick change in their plan. "I wanted to see the ministry, get to know more about it," he said, lowering his eyes bashfully. "And since Susan's aunt runs this department, she said she'd show me. Isn't it amazing how she's in charge of all those people?" he asked innocently, looking up at the minister with wide eyes. Minister Fudge grabbed the lapels of his robes and thrust his chest out importantly. Harry thought he looked like a moron. "Well, Harry, the DMLE is very impressive, of course, but you know, as minister I have quite a few people I supervise as well." He winked at Harry, who inwardly smirked. The man had taken the bait too easily. "You do?" he asked breathlessly. "Wow, maybe one day I can see your office. I bet it's amazing. Mr. Malfoy said that you were brilliant. Do you have a lot of interesting things in there?" "Come on, ask me, come on," he willed him. "Well, how would you like to come see?" "Got M?" "Oh, I dunno." Harry glanced down at the floor again before peeking up through his fringe. "I'm sure you and Madame Bones are too busy to give me more of a tour. This has been a dream come true already." Harry heard Susan give a quiet snicker, but he ignored it for focusing on Fudge. "Nonsense," Fudge cried. "The next Lord Potter, eh? You should be seeing all there is to see of our government and meeting the right people." Harry imagined that he meant he was about to drag Harry about like some sort of prized show pony. "Amelia, you don't mind, do you, if I borrow your young charges here?" Amelia gazed sharply at Harry and Susan, another uncanny look to Professor Snape, seeming to search them for mischief. "No, sir, that would be fine," she said, seemingly satisfied with what she found. "If you'd be so kind to send them straight back here when you're finished." Of course, of course." Fudge had a possessive gleam in his eyes when he looked at Harry again. "You can do this," he coached himself. "You've pretended to be a lot nicer to a lot worse people before." Which was true, but he never planned to use his body as leverage again. He didn't mind cashing in on his fame here to get what he wanted and needed, but if the minister made one move towards him, Britain would need to hold a new election. Harry allowed the minister to usher them along through the ministry as he made his way to his office. He stopped to talk to so many people that Harry stopped listening to their names. Harry kept a tight hold on Susan's hand, using it as the excuse to not shake anyone else. "And here, where the real magic happens," Fudge announced, gesturing dramatically at his office. "That's real gumwood," he said proudly, knocking his fist lightly on his desk. "Nice, eh?" Harry agreed out loud, playing his part perfectly. Privately he thought that when this was his office that he would go with a darker schematic. It was just so bright right now. After Harry thought he had spent enough time sucking up to the minister, who would probably be a good person to have on his side according to Mr. Malfoy, he nudged Susan pointedly. "Harry, do you want to go get lunch?" she asked brightly, interrupting the minister telling another story about some important family he knows. "I know where there's some really amazing desserts in the dining hall." Harry got to his feet and stretched out. "Yeah, that's a good idea. Madame Bones will probably be wanting us back soon." Fudge looked put out by their charade. "Oh, of course, yes. You both should go get something to eat. I trust you can find your way back to Amelia's office on your own." At their obedient nod, he gave them an indulgent wink. "Tell the elves in the dining hall to put your bill on my tab." Harry gave a fake laugh and thanked him eagerly again for the tour and all the stories he shared. "Of course, anytime, lad." Fudge drew himself up and peered down at Harry fondly. "If you ever need anything, I dare say letters addressed to the minister will find me." Harry gave him a polite smile and refrained from rolling his eyes. Mr. Malfoy was right. Fudge just liked being minister, and he was a moron. "Come on," he whispered to Susan, throwing his cloak over them both quickly as soon as they stepped in the hall. "I don't want to be stopped a million times," he said in explanation. "It's quicker under here." Susan held his hand tightly and followed him for a bit as he wandered around lost. "Oh, just follow me," she huffed. Harry blushed faintly but followed Susan, and she turned this way and that, and darted across hallways and down staircases. "Here it is," she whispered, gesturing to an unmarked door. Harry took the cloak off them and knocked politely before opening the door. He walked into what seemed to be an absolutely ordinary, if somewhat larger than expected, office. "Can I help you?" a bored blonde-haired witch asked, not even looking up from the book she was reading at her desk. Harry pulled himself up to look as tall as he could before replying, "I'm here to get a prophecy that was made about me." The witch sighed dramatically, as if Harry was the biggest inconvenience in the world, before looking up and gasping. "Oh, you're Harry Potter." Susan giggled behind him while Harry tried to give her a polite smile, playing the part of the humble boy who lived, but he was worried it came out as more of a grimace. "Yes, ma'am," he said politely, "and I'd like to get a prophecy about me, please." The witch looked him and Susan over carefully before wringing her hands. I don't know. I don't usually get kids down here. I'm not sure what the policy is for kids and prophecies." Harry glanced over his shoulder at Susan, who twisted her mouth into the tiniest of scowls. He looked back at the witch and hoped that Professor Snape's advice would work here like it had before on Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore. He lowered his eyes to the floor and tried to sound as shy as he could. "Well, ma'am, my mum would probably have come with me, but it's just that she's dead, you know. But the prophecy is supposed to tell me why she died." He sniffled a little for effect. "I just don't know why anyone would hurt my parents." He mentally crossed his fingers as he invented a lie on the spot. "And I know that I'm awfully young, but the minister said that you'd be able to help me." He peeked up at her and gave her a sad look, trying out Susan's puppy-eyed look. "I guess I'll just wait until I'm an adult, since I'll never have any parents to come with me." The witch stared at him and her upper lip trembled for a moment before reaching into her desk with a slight sniffle. "No need, dear, you poor thing. Of course you'd have to come alone," she rambled. "Here, sweetheart, just prick your finger on this needle here." She held out a needle to him. "It only hurts for just a moment. You want to let the blood drop onto this parchment here, okay?" Harry doubted that a little prick to his finger was going to hurt, but he nodded and did just what she asked him to do. When he handed the parchment back to her, adding a shy smile for effect, the witch beamed at him. "It looks like there is one prophecy linked to your magic, Mr. Potter. You'll have to come with me to get it. I can't touch it, of course." Harry nodded agreeably, as if he had any idea what she was talking about. "Right, of course." She led him and Susan, who trailed behind him, through another door in her office, and they entered a room full of nothing but towering shelves covered in small, dusty, glass orbs. They glimmered dully in the light issuing from more candle brackets set at intervals along the shelves. They followed her as she walked quickly down rows and row of the glittering orbs. 95, 96, here it is," she announced. 97, Harry Potter." She pointed at one of the small glass spheres that glowed with a dull inner light. though it was very dusty and appeared not to have been touched for many years. Harry carefully edged closer to it and saw that underneath the orb was a small plaque that said, SPT to APWBD. Dark Lord and Harry Potter. Go ahead, dearie, you're the only one who can grab it, she told him in a hushed voice. Harry gave Susan a quick glance and saw her nod, so he closed his fingers around the dusty ball's surface. He had expected it to feel cold, but it did not. On the contrary, it felt as though it had been lying in the sun for hours, as though the glow of light within was warming it. Expecting, even hoping, that something dramatic was going to happen, he lifted the glass ball down from its shelf and stared at it. Nothing whatsoever happened. Susan moved in closer to Harry, gazing at the orb as he brushed it free of the clogging dust. We did it, she whispered fiercely. How do I hear it? He asked the witch. If you'd like to listen to it more than once, then you should place it in a pensive to hear the prophecy, the witch instructed, gidding then back through the huge room. But if you only want to hear it once, then breaking it open is your best bet, but you can never hear it again after that. Harry gripped the little orb tightly as him and Susan made their way back to the second level where her aunt was. He couldn't believe how easy it was. Now he'd be able to hear the whole thing, and maybe start figuring out what was really going on the night Voldemort killed his parents. He really hoped that Professor Snape had a pensive he would let him use when he got back to Hogwarts. He also hoped that the Ministry dining hall had a lot to choose from, because Susan and himself were about to ring up the minister's bill. Amelia Bones POV. When Susan originally told her about her new friend Harry Potter, Amelia had been pleased at their friendship. Lily Evans had been a wonderful friend to her in school, and even though James Potter had been an utter toe-rag, at their wedding, Amelia could see he loved her deeply and would cherish his family always. The fact that he died in an attempt to protect his beloved wife and son is likely a point of pride for him, wherever their souls may be resting. But then Susan wrote that she was worried about Harry. He hates being touched, auntie. The other kids are either horrible to him or terrified of him. I don't think he sleeps much and he won't eat. I think he's used to being hated. Harry got in another fight. Can't you help him like you helped those other kids? Amelia read the letters and didn't like the picture Susan was painting. She had tried to reach out to Albus multiple times to speak with him about Harry, but was rebuffed with each attempt. It almost made her believe he knew what she wanted to speak with him about and was purposefully dodging her. Which was absurd, right? Lily and James had died following Albus' orders. Surely there could be no person who cared more for the child than he. She had almost made herself believe that until Severus Snape appeared in her office. If this were to fall out and you read it, then I have committed no act that the child can find treasonous, he had said when he handed her a parchment. Amelia read it that night, and then spent more than a couple hours at the Ministry, desperately digging for the placement of Harry James Potter in the file cabinets of the Department of Child Safety. There was not a single scrap of evidence that Harry had ever even been an open case in their department. And Amelia remembered something else Severus had said. There are those who would be incredibly interested in his whereabouts. However, those would be the very ones who the child would need shielded from. And as she examined the lack of a paper trail regarding the orphan Harry Potter, Amelia wondered if Albus Dumbledore was one of the people who Harry needed shielded from. Then she very carefully ignored that thought and focused very hard on never thinking of it again. Her mind was glaringly open. It had to be for her position on the Wisengamot, and there was a very powerful Legilimens on the same court of law. Instead, she fretted over Susan's association with him. Harry had a lot of very specific injuries in his medical history that made Amelia worry that he would be too hardened, traumatized, perhaps even mad, to be friends with her niece. But she told Severus she would take him for 2 weeks over the summer, and she would. Amelia Bones was a witch of her word. Then she met him and her heart broke right in two. Harry Potter was the fragile size of a child of perhaps 9, but acted as if he had already fought in wars. He had a wary look when he saw her, as if he believed she would attack him at any given moment. He only stood with his back to the wall. He identified every exit in every room before he walked inside. He stayed out of arm's reach of Amelia at all times. He flinched when Susan moved too suddenly, and stiffened when she touched him. Despite his demeanor, he was also soft-spoken and unfailingly polite. She wondered if he was polite because it was the proper way to behave, or because he was worried of the repercussions of disrespecting an adult. "You look quite a bit like your father," she told him fondly on his first afternoon there, "though you have Lily's eyes." Of course, neither Lily nor James Potter ever had a jagged scar that stretched down the side of their face. She saw multiple silver scars across Harry's hands and wrists that spoke to a lifetime of battle. James had not lived to even double Harry's years of life, but Harry's scars spoke to a short life filled with triple the pains James had ever experienced. Professor Snape told me I could be a James Potter miniature, but I don't think he meant it as a compliment, Harry said with a smirk. Amelia had laughed, remembering Severus' feud with James in school. Yes, well, those two took the Slytherin and Gryffindor rivalry to new heights, didn't they? That's so silly, said Susan. We have a good friend Neville and he's in Gryffindor, right, Harry? Amelia knew that Neville Longbottom had allied himself formally with Harry Potter. The entire ministry likely knew it as much as Augusta had bragged. She was surprised that Augusta had allowed him to do so. She would have disapproved of a formal political alliance at such a young age, but Harry Potter probably needed allies, and she was sure that Neville Longbottom would grow to be as strong as his father and as kind as his mother. I think it's stupid to be friends with people, or hate them, just because of what house they're in, Harry declared firmly. Susan would be my best friend even if she was in Gryffindor. That fierce loyalty reminded her sadly of James' own surety in his friends. One dead, one missing, and one who never deserved the love or loyalty of James Potter. She hoped all of those in their group, as Susan called it, deserved such faith. She was amused by Harry's interest in the DMLE. She didn't think she was imagining the tightening around his eyes when he was introduced to Kingsley Shacklebolt. Kingsley certainly noticed how Harry had edged away from him, and would likely want an answer on why the boy hero of Britain seemed ready to flee or fight during a simple conversation. She certainly didn't imagine the way that Harry had looked disdainfully at the other members of her department, who had tripped over their own feet to introduce themselves to him. She had nearly laughed at the time. She never imagined that a face that physically resembled James Potter so much could possibly have such a Severus Snape expression on it. But Harry Potter did not like law enforcement, that much was obvious. She imagined that James would be disappointed by this. He himself had been training to be a hit wizard before he was forced into hiding. Harry had seemed pleased to meet Minister Fudge, though. It wasn't every day that the Minister of Magic gives a child a tour of his offices. Harry and Susan had returned from Fudge's office with their eyes shining and looking very pleased with themselves. She wondered if Harry had political aspirations. She knew he had struck up a friendship with the sons of Lucius Malfoy and the Contessa Zabini of Italy. Perhaps their families had influenced Harry's ideals. One evening, she finally saw her opportunity to ask Harry about it. Susan was up in her room working on a summer assignment for Phileas, and Harry was pursuing their bookcase. "Have you thought much about what you want to do after school?" she asked him neutrally when she entered the sitting room. Harry stiffened slightly and turned so his back was to the bookshelf. Maybe work in the ministry," he said softly, glancing quickly behind her to the empty doorway. "But not in the DMLE, right?" Harry jerked his eyes to her, a faint blush staining his cheeks. He looked incredibly like Lily in that moment. "I just think maybe I could make more of a difference somewhere else," he mumbled. She indulged him thoughtfully. "And what kind of differences would you make?" Harry shrugged, but his eyes got a gleam in them that reminded her of James' eyes when he was on a rant about transfiguration. "I'd get rid of the idea of bloodlines mattering first, and I'd let goblins and elves and werewolves and other magical beings have a voice in the Wisengamot. It's stupid not to include them." Amelia smiled. Harry held very idealistic views on the future of the British Wixen world. "And I'd set up a way to find Muggle-borns sooner and move them to our world before they're 11. That caught Amelia by surprise. "Why?" she asked incredulously. Harry averted his eyes from hers, staring down at his hands, which were clenched tightly into fists. "Muggles are dangerous, yeah." "Are they?" she asked gently, thinking again of his extensive injuries. Severus hadn't said that Harry was raised in the Muggle world, just that he had an unsatisfactory home life that he needed sanctuary from for the summer. But that diagnostic scan had spoken for itself, and Harry had no living Wixen relations, which just left Muggles. Merlin damned Muggles that better hope Amelia never finds them, because she knew quite a few members of the DMLE who would not hesitate to extract off the record revenge for James Potter's son. Regardless of Harry's status as the boy who lived, James had been one of theirs, which made Harry one of theirs, and no one in her department took it well when one of their own was hurt in any way. "Yeah, they are," Harry said firmly, answering her previous question, "and kids who are magic shouldn't have to be around them." "What if they want to? What if they don't want to leave their families? Why wouldn't they want to come to a place where they belong, where they're special?" he asked her. Amelia didn't truly have an answer for him. Muggles could be dangerous. The statue of secrecy was in place to protect Wixen from them discovering their secrets, but she doubted if she could explain to Harry how children would be attached to their families. "You have a lot of ideas," she said diplomatically. Harry shrugged again. She thought this might be his preferred gesture in conversations. "I just think things should change." Despite Harry's maturity, Amelia thought that he should have some normal childhood summer memories. If she had died with her sister and her husband, and Lily and James had taken in Susan, she knew that they would do the same. "How would you both like to go on a day trip?" she asked one morning, on Harry's 5th day with them. "Ooh, where to?" Susan asked with an eager smile. Harry glanced at her with his green eyes slightly narrowed before ducking his head. "There's a Muggle fair in London I thought we might go to. There should be food and games and rides. We can portkey to the London Wixen Collection area, then walk to the fair." "Can I wear my Muggle clothes?" Susan asked, bouncing in her seat. "Of course," she laughed. "We'd make an odd group in our robes." She looked over at Harry and registered his tightly coiled muscles. He looked prepared to flee at any moment. "Harry," she said softly, "do you want to go? We can do something else if not." Harry jerked his head up quickly and gave her an unconvincing grin. "Yeah, it sounds brill." "Do you have Muggle clothes you can wear?" She'd mostly only seen him sporting wizarding robes. Harry nodded. "Yep, Professor Snape took me shopping, didn't he? We got a lot of clothes and some of them still fit." Amelia was inordinately grateful that Harry had found a mentor, friend, father figure, a something in Severus Snape. Severus was a good man, an honorable and brave man who followed a strict code of ethics, even if it is his own personal codes that he follows. "Excellent," she clapped her hands, "then we'll go after lunch." Harry seemed more nervous than usual, but she brushed it off. He had probably never been to a fair and was unsure what to expect. "Wow," Susan squealed when they arrived at the fair that evening. "This is brill." Amelia laughed at her enthusiasm and the easy way she seemed to have picked up Harry's slang. Harry stood with his hands trembling slightly, staring suspiciously at the throngs of Muggles crowding the area. Amelia thought it through for a moment and came to an impulsive decision. She pulled the two kids off to the side and crouched down to their level. "You guys want to see a cool spell?" she asked, her eyes sparkling mischievously. Susan bobbed her head eagerly, and Harry flicked his eyes down to her wand hand before looking back up at her eyes. "What kind of spell?" he asked. She leaned closer to them so they could hear her whispering. "We can make it so the Muggles don't even notice us. They wouldn't be able to jostle us or anything." Harry's eyes widened the slightest bit, and she saw a glimmer of interest in them. "Really?" he breathed. "They couldn't touch us?" Amelia shook her head, still holding her smile despite the way her heart ached at correctly identifying the crux of Harry's current fear. "I can do it to Susan first so you can see how it works." At his accepting nod, she quickly placed a Notice Me Not and redirection charm on her niece. "Watch," she murmured to Harry. They kept their eyes on Susan as she ran through the crowd of Muggles. Not a single person there seemed to notice the fiery little red head dancing through the crowds, or the way they shifted themselves slightly to make sure they were no closer than 20 cm to her. Susan laughed brightly in the middle of the crowd. "Come on, Harry, this is amazing." Harry glanced up at Amelia. "How will we order food or get on the rides?" Amelia whispered in his ear, "Can you keep a secret?" Harry nodded quickly. "Magic," she winked. Harry's eyes took on a look of what she would almost call respect. She should have known that the best way to earn the respect of James Potter's son was to bend the rules nearly to breaking point. "Brill, will you teach me those spells?" She agreed she would, and explained what she was doing as she placed them on him, and then herself. "Let's go." Amelia felt a twinge on her conscience as she confounded and charmed Muggles into letting them on the rides and selling them food, but then she saw Harry. Harry had never looked more his age or more like Lily. His eyes were bright with excitement as they ate greasy snacks and played games. He laughed and whooped loudly with Susan on the roller coaster, and she thought back on every other laugh of his she'd heard so far and realized this was the first one that sounded genuinely happy. Laws be damned, it was worth it. The rest of the summer Amelia had dedicated herself to giving Harry as many childhood memories as she could. She took the kids to a water park, where Harry refused to swim shirtless. She also took them to parks for ice cream, and Harry helped her teach Susan how to climb trees. Harry was suspiciously adept at this skill. They also visited Mal's, and Susan begged her to visit the Muggle cinema, so they did that too. She showed Harry the beach where his parents had gotten married and taught them both how to build sand castles. She saw that Harry carried his camera with him everywhere, documenting each event they experienced. She smiled when she saw Susan smushing her face next to his for photos and found herself playing photographer frequently for the two of them. By the end of the 2 weeks, both kids seemed more giddy, relaxed, and childlike than they originally had. She waved them farewell as the Hogwarts Express took them back towards school and felt rather pleased with herself. Right before they boarded the train, Harry had twitched and then caught her by surprise by quickly flashing one of his arms around her in what could almost be called a hug. She thought she might flew Severus and let him know how it went. She'd also find out about having Harry back again next summer. He was a little rough around the edges, but an overall good boy.